cripple. We use the term cripple for amongst ourselves. We call ourselves crips. I'm a crip. If somebody's got a limp, they're a crip. You know. Or somebody's got cerebral palsy, well, he'll call himself a crip. Don't anybody else dare call him a crip, though. It's just like black people can call themselves a certain word, you know. You try doing it as a white boy, you're asking for trouble. So many of us have been marginalised and institutionalised, and the problem is that even though it is cheaper to give us personal assistance than it is to institutionalise us, there is a drive, again, to institutionalise us. Please, John, yeah,
okay.
Top whiskey would be great.
Yeah, okay. They're running out there to get them up.
Alright, well, that'll be you running out, I guess, John.
I suppose. No.
Why do I stay here? Have a look at the view out my window. I've got a constantly moving pageant of water, traffic, light. The Liffey is constantly changing. If I didn't have the Liffey or a body of water outside my window, God man, I'd have killed myself. It's all right if there's any shrinks listening. I have no intention of topping myself. Too much of a coward for that, thank you. People will have noticed the fact that I live up on the first floor and there's stairs and there's no lift and there's no ramp. How do I get up here? Well, friends, I hover. I hover. I hover with the aid of a couple of people who carry me physically up and down the stairs.
Thanks very much, guys. See you later.
I come from a small town called Mohill, which is down here in County Leitrim, and that's where I grew up in the 50s and 60s. Well, we're going now to meet my mother, who's a sprightly 83-year-old, just back from Australia, and we'll probably run into my brother Ronan as well. Now, my mum used to reckon she could get pregnant just washing my father's underwear. We all thought that there was a little bit more to it than that. My father was a vet in Leitrim, and there wasn't an awful lot to do, so I suppose that might explain the 9 kids. They brag, my parents did, about their family planning. We're roughly about every 2 years apart until they suddenly started having them in batches around 1966. Yeah, would you look at the way the locks have... I wasn't allowed to grow the beard, so I grew the locks all the way down the chin.
A good-looking fellow.
I love this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daddy, it's that 4 in the pint, Smithick.
Smithick, Guinness and
Smithick,
Harp.
Guinness and Harp, and that was it.
Yeah, I remember that. That was the parting glass.
That was the parting glass.
Which the last line of the song is on Dad's headstone.
That's right.
Come sing to me the parting glass, good night, and
And
go on, God be with you all.
We built a pub called the Parting Glass, where I had really good music, I had a really good sound system. We got to be known as a kind of hippie hangout. But sadly, none of that stuff about drugs was true, because, you know, as far as we was concerned, Guinness was a drug and whiskey was a dangerous drug. You know, we could barely afford the Guinness. I went to university for a year, studied law, discovered drinking women. Law came third.
What year was this a bit?
That was 1970. And I ended up in a squat, like so many kids did back then in London. Hey, we were cool. I went into a job in Manpower, and I ended up with a job in advertising. And even though I was kind of lefty, hippie, anti-capitalist, much to my horror and amazement, it turned out I was really good at this. And so it came that I built a career in advertising.
Yourself and Tidge.
I know who I married, yes, I do remember, I do remember. The Sex Pistols had an album out, and the album was Nevermind the Bollocks. It's hard to believe that this Republican was brought a wife by the Queen of England, in a way. It was the Queen's Silver Jubilee or something. So I went for a party and had a disco on, where was it? Tottenham Court Road. I ran into this nurse I'd run into before, and a few years later we got married. It was one hell of a wedding. I was in love with her, she was in love with Italy. It seemed kind of logical that I should fall in love with Italy. That's a nice photograph of the land and Tidge and the goats and the dog. I'm just looking at the warm weather.
Yeah.
Eventually we were fortunate enough to find a farm pretty much adjacent to that belonging to my parents-in-law. And it was a tumble-down ruin, and so we set to work on it. We were farming organically, we were feeding ourselves, we had no money, and in order to finance the dream, I was both teaching English and I ended up as an export director for a number of local firms. And that was great fun because I could work in 3 languages.
Here's a cluster of people and some goats, and Daddy, you, me, Tidge.
Yeah, you had lost your hair at that time.
I had alopecia, but my hair was coming back at that stage.
Not all marriages are made to last in heaven, and mine unfortunately was one of those that didn't. One day, my beloved, my Tidge, told me that she just no longer loved me anymore. And I took this very hard, and you know, I'm sure it was 2 to tango, it must have been hard on her too. Of course, now, here we are 25, 30 years later, and you can't be enemies forever. We weren't enemies very long. Our marriage ended. After I got back to Ireland, I spent quite some time licking my wounds. I felt sorry for myself a bit, but I got over that, and eventually I got involved with my brothers in the Boxty House, and then I went on eventually to take over another famous coffee shop called The Joy of Coffee, which had become a landmark in Temple Bar. And I got great pleasure out of that for a couple of years until my illness set in. Now bear in mind that I'd shuffled in the hospital and now I was in bed and couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't even transfer into a wheelchair on my own. I didn't know what was happening and I was scared out of my wits. Nobody could tell me how long I was going to live, if it was going to get worse, if it was going to crush my lungs. And I had a morbid fear of ending up in an institution. I'd seen institutions and man, the smell of piss and cabbage. Eventually I got out of hospital, a care package was put in place for me, and I went back to my own apartment. And I was being looked after with the aid of a carer to help me live independently. But I was still, man, I was very depressed. I felt I was ugly, I felt I was... If I went out of the pub in my wheelchair, I thought people were looking at me funny. No big words. I was just paranoid, I was scared. I thought I was really ugly. I was no uglier than I was before, I was just short. I was just really, really self-conscious, and so I became a recluse. And I just kind of hid away like a hermit. I was in a massive depression. The person who probably saved my life was my occupational therapist, who kept trying to get me to go out and about and got me an electric wheelchair, and I kept putting off the reasons, the days I'd go out to do the lessons and the exam on how to drive the electric wheelchair. And she said, Dara, you're going out for your electric wheelchair lessons. I know, Ellen, I'm not feeling great. Dara, if I don't give 2 flying fiddlers how you're feeling today, you are coming out. A week later, I had travelled solo to my brother's wedding in France in my new electric wheelchair. And after that, there was no holding me. I got then interested in the independent living movement because, hey, I wanted to live independently. And I was getting tired of organisations supposedly representing me being quoted in the newspapers as saying, the disabled want this, the disabled want that. And I was a member of these organisations and these people weren't ever asking, like us, the disabled.
And I'll never forget that day. That was in Newry.
It was
the week after Bloody Sunday, the commemoration.
It was indeed.
I see several of the founders of the civil rights movement there. Nearly 45 years later, and I'm still fighting for civil rights. You know, I'm in the Centre for Independent Living, you know, the independent living movement. Yes. Well, we've been lobbying for the recognition of the UN Declaration on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So, you know, there's lots of people, the farmers are always having demonstrations in Brussels and Strasbourg.
Yeah.
Well, they have marches. Right. We can't.
Yeah.
So we're having a freedom drive, we call it. Basically, we're meeting up, networking with groups from all the other European countries.
Yeah.
And we're all going to lobby our own MEPs. So it's a massive thing.
It's sad when you have to do that, go that far.
Yeah, it is sad that we have to go that far.
Yeah, but you know, that's the way of it now.
I think that 100 years ago, the meek shall inherit the earth.
Yeah.
6 feet of it.
Yeah, good luck.
Hotel space turns out to be at a real premium in Strasbourg.
That's fine with me.
You can sleep alone or with another people.
It depends on the other person, but I'm easy. I'll sleep with anybody. The meek are the peaceful and quiet people who don't do anything. And this t-shirt,
they don't achieve anything.
Yeah, This T-shirt is saying basically you have to fight for your rights.
I
You need to
understand,
go to get shit.
now.
I meet Arno from Belgium.
But I'm known as being a little guy with a big mouth, and I don't like to discuss on and on and on. I'm a man of the action.
The whole point of independent living movement is that we say nothing about us without us.
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 Independent life.
The part of the convention that deals with independent living is Article 19.
Meeting old comrades like Dermot Hayes here, amongst the tremendous Irish crowd who've made enormous efforts to get here, leaves me feeling suddenly really energised. Martin Naughton is a veteran Irish disability activist who was a founder of the European Network for Independent Living.
Part of the journey of going to Strasbourg is taking the courage and the conviction into your own hands and doing something about it. We now have to convince ourselves to take our place in mainstream society. It's up to us. We need to bring to it that lived experience of people with disabilities.
After our meeting with the Irish MEPs, Mairead McGuinness elegantly sums up our situation for a wider European audience.
The concept of independent living, it seems odd that we're discussing it, because everybody likes to choose how they live and where they live. But we've decided that some people in our countries can't do that.
I'd like to welcome President Gentilizza. Freedom drivers, we feel we are in solidarity. You with us, we with you, because we are absolutely the same.
For the President, another photo op. For Martin, it's his mission.
Mr. President,
yeah.
there's 50 million of us, that's what that represents. 50 million in that population. We shall That was a very special moment when people just so spontaneously would sing, "We Shall Overcome." It was very, very moving. You see a lot of grown men or grown hearts cry.
God, you look great after your
Thanks
trip.
very much.
Trip.
Well, it's a long old weekend, but hell, I enjoyed the travel, I enjoyed the food, and it was great meeting so many different people. But will there be any useful outcome? Who knows? Anyway.
Give us a big hug.
I will. Come here.
Oh, that's great.
Cheers. Love you all.
But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call good night and joy be to